Okay, so everyone should see that online. We can see it here physically. So the format tonight is about 6 or 7, did you say?
7. I've just counted.
There's 7 talks tonight. So what we're going to do is kind of rapid fire. So we'll get the first one all lined up, mic'd up, ready to go. And then you have 5 minutes. We've got timer going on the phone. And after 5 minutes, the timer will automatically go into a 3-minute timer. And that's Q&A. So you can ask questions for 3 minutes, get some answers. And then we'll have an immediate timer after that of 1 minute, where we'll go over to the prioritization grid on the wall. We basically have one axis saying the scale of impact that this would have on emissions reduction on one axis. Cool, we're online as well. And on the bottom axis, we've got NZN's ability to influence and our time to impact. So if we're going to have a fast impact, it's going to be far on the right. It's going to be a really slow impact. And that might be just from our ability to influence or the size of the problem. It'd be far on the left. So then we kind of get so we have 1 minute as a group to self-organize and position it on the grid. So somebody might position it, somebody might disagree and move it somewhere else. At the end of 1 minute, wherever it is, that's where it stays. We'll get people online to do the same, and we'll sync what we see online with what we see on the board.
And Alan will lead the people online in a separate discussion.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got chats and discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to the format, Alan. So we would have then had our 1 minute for prioritization on the grid. Then we got 1 minute to transition everything. Transfer mics to the new talker, and then bang, after that 1 minute, straight into the 5 minutes. It's basically a 10-minute cycle for 7 of us, 70 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. So who's first?
And Steve, just to finish up, once everyone's been through that cycle,
Yep.
are we doing any sort of recalibration at the end?
At the very, very end, yes, we're going to vote the winner. So we're going to have some placement of things on the grid that give us an indication of the value and time to value for that particular idea. But in the end, it will come down to where the energy of this group is. So we'll dot vote on the ones that are on the wall to find the winner.
And take into account whatever we get from the online people as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
They can dot vote online as well. And we'll merge the votes together.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Should
All
be good fun.
All right.
Over to
Any
number
questions?
1.
No? All good?
Okay, so
How many when to start the 5 minute?
as soon as Brian starts talking.
Okay.
We're in a climate emergency. I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, that we're all well aware of what's going on, but increasing greenhouse gas emissions from human activities are driving climate change. CO2 emissions are higher than they have been in over 1 million years. And we're seeing weather impacts and devastating floods, etc. every day. And we're going to continue to see these things happen until we dramatically reduce our emissions. Australia has huge potential for emissions reductions, as we'll hear from in the other pitches. Sadly, Australia is among the worst performers on climate in every sense. This is highlighted officially by the recent report on the environment, but unofficially by the 53 tabs still open on my computer. Australia is in the top 10 emitters per capita and second behind the US in annual waste disposal, while also wasting 312 kilos of food per person per year. That'd be like growing food in all of Victoria and just throwing it all out. It's crazy. So Nero didn't fiddle while Rome burned, and neither shall we. Climate change requires all of us to respond together, and we will. When Alice called me about the pitch, she was very excited about some research she heard on the radio. A PhD student had found that trackers like Fitbit or other pedometers had a motivating effect on the people who use them. So the ability to track your effort was the motivator in you continuing that effort or improving. So Alice was interested to explore whether this principle could apply to climate action. If you could track the impact of your choices and be informed of better options, would you be motivated to take those actions? We believe that growing climate literacy will be the most impactful solution. Knowledge is power, and thus we as citizens, investors, consumers, role models, and professionals can be empowered to make climate conscious decisions and actions a norm. Change our habits, create new ones that are good for people, the planet, and potentially for our pocket. There are so many things that we can easily change. We propose to create or adapt an educational database or platform of some sort like Climate Clever to inspire consumers to make simple swaps and better choices. Furthermore, with gamification, such as rewards and badges awarded to users, the platform will make it fun to make these better choices. Who's familiar with Duolingo? We imagine the platform could adopt some of the strategies Duolingo employs to encourage users to regularly practice their language skills, such as the badges, streaks for consecutive days, leaderboards, and connecting with your friends. For example, your bank invests in fossil fuels. The platform will show you information on banks that don't, and the impact that you will have by moving your money away from that bank. By making the switch, participants could be awarded a clean investor badge, for example, which will then be visible to their friends and inspire them to make the change also. Maybe your diet is environmentally unfriendly. The platform will show you the positive impact of eating less meat, for example, and you could be awarded a badge or streaks for going vegetarian for a certain number of days or meals. The platform could include a statewide emissions reductions total so that people could see the accumulative effect of their efforts among those of their peers. We would love to see where Net Zero Network could take this concept. Research suggests that your neighbor is more likely to get solar panels if you have them, get climate literate, and your neighbor will too. Thank you. Well, Q&A. All right. Any questions? Are there any like platforms that you're currently? I'm unaware of platforms that measure your impact so that you could visualize it in a way that's motivating. I know that with Climate Clever, you can input data from your house, like your energy bills or the car you drive, and they can show you emissions like that, and they can recommend a course of action. So Climate Clever could be one that we could use or adapt in terms of that. I also think, yeah, but I don't think it has a feature where you can cumulatively track how you're doing.
One thing I'll add to that,
Yeah.
is when Vanessa spoke, she kind of spoke
Yes.
last time. We had a chat afterwards. They have this concept of an organisation in Climate Clever. So there is the potential in their system for us. We could all have individual accounts in it, but then there could also be a collective dashboard with our anonymized data about how we're doing
Oh, cool.
collectively.
So in that sense, like we could have expand the
Yeah.
scope of the group and make
Yeah.
it WA state kind of focus
Yes,
to
we
it.
simply have to convince 2.7 million other people to come join us on
All right.
But that's not being kind of angled. So.
Yeah,
Buying in.
yeah, if you increase the scope of it, you just need to get people involved, right?
So where would we build the platform or modify an existing platform? I can see that's a fantastic vision. But where would we start? Because this is World Hunger in there, so it's
Mhm.
almost, this is an umbrella for net zero, and then we pick topics that we start and then grow within there. Do you have any thoughts on?
No, that's a really good question. Like, the concept already exists in terms of climate saver is already there. And yeah, I don't know where we start. That's something that we can take up. Like, but yeah, you're right. It is an umbrella because you can include every facet of emissions under this kind of idea. So we could see massive reductions depending on uptake and popularity and people's motivation.
How do you best see in my best way scale?
I think like an app, like, I don't know if you've seen like Duolingo, like everybody's got a phone. So you can easily download and input some data, and then all the information is there. If it says you'll be given different maybe choices on how to improve your impact, and I think the scalability is that people have fun and everything, and that we can popularize it, maybe like that. Yeah.
Okay, the beep is in one. Beep, 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 beep. We now have 1 minute, so I've got your card running climate WA. Yeah. Yeah, cool. So here's the card, please come along and carry for 1 minute, when you take a chat on that brief. It's like time.
One day.
No, I think
It's gonna take a long time to develop these outcomes, but it's not-
Is there a way we can break it down into smaller bites as chunks to target? I think, is that what we
It is a meaningful start, but maybe that means that like the time to impact is actually pretty good. Right. Because I'm doing that.
30 seconds.
Yeah. I'll throw you in the middle.
Yeah.
Without enough.
We're straight in from
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone disagrees with that, you can go and move it now, then you've got 10 seconds.
Without enough definition.
Yes, yes, yeah. Okay, so 1 minute transition to the next speaker. Who's next?
Adrian, yeah, Andrew, you don't have anything to
No,
that makes life easy.
No slides,
I'll start the pitch when you start talking.
cool. We've got making tracking emissions simpler and more transparent. So this was quite an interesting one. There was a lot of interesting ideas to pitch on. But much like the previous talk, I think I can pretty well grow on that because there is a lot of work that's being done, particularly under commercial building disclosure, under the NABERS, National Building Environmental Rating System, and Green Star under the Green Building Council, Green Building Council, in terms of simplifying things to star ratings. Everyone knows what 5 out of 5 is, that's good, 10 out of 10, those kind of things. People tend to get quite confused though when you talk about residential stuff. Oh, I've got a 7-star NABERS rating, which reduces your air conditioning consumption for a house. But what does that mean over day to day? You know, what does that mean for your daily choices? So NABERS is something like that looks at the previous 12 months emissions and gives your benchmark rating against everyone else. That's fantastic in that will last 12 months, but it doesn't really tell you exactly, it's simple, but is it quick and effective? Not necessarily. So other ideas to spread that applications. So we work with Power Ledger, where you can basically get it straight on your phone, and you can see exactly what you're using. Much like what was said before. Bang, bang. I can see what I'm using. I made choices in near real time. Other ways to reduce your carbon emissions that would be simple. I'm wearing Spain and so on, some places in Europe, now you can select electric vehicles when you take an Uber trip. Can't do that here yet, we just don't have enough uptake. But these are simple, quick, clear, effective ways to make choices. One of the things that made Neighbours so successful was the Commercial Building Disclosure Act. We're in Australia. That's a legislative approach to enforce people to start measuring their impacts, because once you can measure, then you can manage. And it comes back to a simple rating that everyone knows. They buy into an office building, for instance, they can make a choice. That now expands across the whole built environment. And we need to look at ways of legislating that for the whole built environment, homes, so that we cover the whole economy. Other things that are starting to impact and make things clearer and simpler are international legislation from places such as Singapore that are now starting to tax, that is a tax haven, 17.5% company tax rate. And Singapore government said, we're going to tax you if you don't decrease your international portfolio of carbon emissions. Carbon import tax for European Union. Another way where they are forcing companies, not in a simple way, quite a complex way, because the data doesn't exist. But if we don't start to see this legislative approach come across and target companies, like particularly big polluters that are exporting or whatever the case may be, owning asset portfolios of buildings, which will affect everyone. In some cases in point are some infrastructure providers that I've had a look at around Perth. We've got boilers from 1968 that just haven't been upgraded, gas boilers. And that is common. If it works, it ain't broke, let's not fix it. Even though now we're at a point where we need to report on this and go, okay, we can do better, much more. We can shift to electrification and we can lower carbon emissions. So once we start doing these ratings, you get a simple star rating, and if it's all benchmarked, where you sit against your peers, whether it be at a personal level or at a company level or at a built environment asset level, then we can start to really drive changes towards a positive impact. So one of the things are through Neighbours is that energy efficiency is a key outcome. People, well, if we don't need to use energy, then why are we using it and costing us money and costing us a half star or a star? So it's that gamification kind of process, but it does need to become a lot simpler. But if the underlying elements aren't there to measure carbon emissions, no electricity metering, no way of capturing the data, no way of integrating it easily and seamlessly, it costs a lot of money. So the first couple of times that we do this, first time Neighbours was probably in other types of rating systems, there's a big impost on people initially. But once that impost is passed and the data starts to roll in and savings start to occur, payback periods, and people start to have money back in the hip pocket, that's where that simplification makes big changes. And we see a steady increase in star ratings and a steady decrease in carbon emissions towards where we're going. And one of the things with, say, Green Star is that all Green Star ratings require net zero carbon. No.
Thank you. Cool.
Questions? Yeah.
We're into the Q&A.
Mind if I chip in? So the challenge of measuring emissions is obviously enormous. Can you see an angle where we as a group can try and crack that nut?
I think focusing on
You guys.
system. I was going to pause for 1 second. where we can start to support the transition to that legislation and really discuss the good effects that we're seeing in different, locally, nationally, and then international effects of other people's legislation here, and where we can start to advise, or the European Union carbon border tax is starting to affect people here. Hey, we should be aware, start getting prepared now. Or the Singapore government's mandate on listed companies to really start to be aware. That's going to affect everyone who goes to a hotel, because huge asset owners and partners in hotels and even office are based in Singapore. So really having those kind of discussions, cool apps that we come up with and find along the way. I think sharing those would be really valuable.
So it's about the group helping individuals and organisations understand all the tools that are available to them.
Yeah.
And the also the kind of the stick is the legislation and the costs which are coming on emissions, and making aware of those as well.
And making choices sooner than later. Obviously, when it's legislated, most people wait.
Yeah.
But obviously we're in a position where we can't really wait any longer because of the impact of carbon emissions on climate change. So, legislation is coming in 2028, 2030 with the EU stuff, but let's make changes now, because the enormous investment to suddenly flick a switch and be able to report automatically, you've got huge infrastructure changes.
Okay. So making emissions tracking simpler was the title, wasn't it? So
yeah.
What can we do? What can we do to that? How can we help organisations and people make?
Getting electricity metering in there, doing ratings.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
We still got 30 seconds. Another question.
Okay, should we head to the so it is. Yeah. Making tracking emissions simpler and more transparent.
I think in terms of the scale, this is where we're going to go. So that's going to be the biggest impact, and then it becomes, and this would almost be a segue into that. It would be one of those examples that we're talking about. How do we start this? Maybe through here. I think that is the impact huge. But it's not super quick, because to get to that point, there's a lot of take place, a lot of work that needs to be done. But it's not super hard. That's the problem with it. Do we say it's like? Yeah.
Here.
I think it worked it out. If you silent mute that one.
Right, I need the clicker.
Yep.
Everybody with my back.
Right, just move the camera.
Blind, so I need binoculars to actually see the tiny screen. Hi everyone. Sing and dance while we're waiting. Technical glitches. Please don't. Nobody capture that on at home. Thank you. No.
Are these portable mics actually on, or are we just doing the sound via the laptop anyway? Not sure.
Okay. That was the slide on. I've got to put the sticker up. It's one
That's on the sticker.
below the sticker.
Below the sticker.
That
Okay.
one just there. Yep.
Thank you very much. Okay. You ready? Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Get to boil the ocean with this topic. Growing WA's low carbon export economy. Not exactly the easiest, but what I will say is that WA is really, really reliant. As you can see from the two circles, $240.3 billion from the last state. So the whole of the country, 54% of it comes from us. And it's worth mountains of money. Right, but associated with that is a massive amount of emission. Absolutely monstrous. So one of the challenges that we have doing my back of the envelope mathematics earlier today, I worked out that we spend, as if we've got an allowance, but if we spend approximately 0.27 tonnes of carbon emissions for every dollar that we earn in export revenue. Now, it doesn't sound like much when you put it that way, but actually, what that means is that for every tonne of iron ore that's being exported from the northwest of WA, that's 51 tonnes of carbon. Right, and you think about how many tonnes go on to one of those big ships, that's actually an awful lot of carbon. The other thing to bear in mind, which was mentioned earlier, CBAM is coming, and there's the reason why this is dark, like the winter, for the exporters. Okay, EU and Japan, in the process of legislating, well, it's already happened in the EU, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, i.e. the border carbon tax. This is already having an impact in WA. Okay, it has started because the Chinese have told various different people, including Twiggy and Rio, that they must now produce low carbon iron ore. The penalty price has initially been set at 65 euros per tonne. Okay, so based on today's exchange rate, that's 96 bucks a tonne of carbon. That's a lot of money. There's also a lot of financial penalty and hopefully some degree of incentive. Right, but what happens if you're not a massive multinational company? Right, what happens if you don't have the pockets of Rio or Woodside? What do you do? Okay. So, technical error. Oh, no, right, okay. Right, it's these guys that need help right now. Right, so what do we export other than iron ore? What is it that we actually send offshore? Okay, so if we're just thinking about the EU and Japan, okay, the two places that currently have some form of border adjustment mechanism, right, or it's coming in. Right, you can see lots of ore, lots of petroleum. I didn't even know we made petroleum, to be honest with you, but I'm assuming that's LNG of some description. Right, those guys, as I said, there's lots of work that they're currently doing. I've heard of, there's green gold, there's green nickel, okay? Haven't heard much about green copper yet, but I'm sure it's not far away. All right, but canola, wheat, petroleum, not sure. So why should this network even care about this? All right. This is a big deal for us. If we can't get this right, our actual way of life is potentially going to be underscored, right? Because the pressures are building globally to ensure that there is a reduction of carbon footprint. And there are categories of these exports who have no idea what to do, right? And are there actually opportunities to create new carbon exports that are low in carbon? Now, challenging is 6 months is a drop in the ocean when it comes to this stuff. Okay, it takes, it takes 6 months to build a plan to put in place for the reduction of, replacement of energy at a mine site with solar. Right, that's just the plan. So what can we do in 6 months? Well, I've got us some ideas. So I've already split everything down, and I'm sorry, I'm going to run into our talking time. Okay, so because this is a massive elephant, I've tried to break it up. Okay, so think of this as various different toes, tails of the elephant, and we are the knife and fork. So we could collectively develop some pathways for agricultural industries to decarbonise, i.e. wheat and canola, because they're going to get hit. We could develop pathways for companies involved in freight movement, right? Anybody know anyone at CBH? We're having a conversation potentially. We can work on carbon literacy, harking back to our first speech, but specifically with producers in the wheat and canola industries. How about we think about developing farmer packs, right? Help them understand what's coming for them. We could have a fantastic wine-induced brainstorming session, right, where we look at throw mud at the walls for new types of carbon export industries. We can undertake lobbying, right? We can actually talk about the importance of decisions being made right now. So if you're buying equipment right now and you think that it's going to last you for 10 years and you're not making provision for carbon reduction or fuel conversion in that purchasing, we could be influencing those decisions. Okay, encouraging energy efficiency and waste recycling within exporters. Easy pickings. And we could potentially also get involved in the EPWA-led sectoral decarbonisation strategies, which are being written right now by the government.
And not yet consulted on that, are they?
Pardon?
There's no consultation for them yet.
Not yet, but it's not far away because I had a conversation with them the other day.
Yeah.
So that was it for me. Questions? Very quickly. 2 seconds.
1 minute of questions.
1 minute of questions.
The microphone is now working when I turn the volume on, so we could just pass that around now that my technology is working.
See, I was so comprehensive. Nobody has any questions for me.
Can you please go back 1 slide so we can see?
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant, mate.
I don't know. I don't know.
The one that's the appropriate one.
That'll do. I'm not technology literate.
Got a question here. Got a question here.
So I was just asking, so you want
Microphone.
so any of these, no, to Mama. So you're saying start with any of these? as
Yes,
an
I
initial
think that
project?
we could actually do any one of these in a 6-month window. All right, so we could pick 1, 2, 3, or all, depending on how ambitious we feel. And we could undertake any of those things. This may not be time permitting, this last one, because that will be subject to government, the availability of the information, but we can work up something for all of these within a 6-month window and have the potential to make a difference.
Just so the audience at home can hear.
Are the wheat and canola industries subject to the CBAM?
Not yet. All right, so they will be in phase 2 of CBAM. So phase 1 is steel, electricity, hydrogen and ammonia as imports into Europe and into Japan. But wheat is expected to be in the 2nd phase.
Which is mid-2030s?
No. So 2024, we start paying on the, 2024, you start having to report. 2025, you start paying for the first round. And then in that same 2025, you start reporting on the 2nd phase. So the expectation is by 2026, wheat and canola agricultural products will be subject to CBAM within Europe and Japan. So that's actually not that far away. I know it sounds like a long way away, but 4 years to do stuff in this space is really tight timeframes. And most farmers have no idea that this is coming their way.
I mean, yeah, everyone's talked about mining, no one's talked about wheat and canola being impacted by this. No one's ready for this.
I know.
Which one of these would you start with?
Sorry.
Which one would you, if you had to pick?
If I had to pick one, I would actually do the yellow one and the green one would be the two that I would pick. If it was me, but it's up to the group.
Okay, it's time.
Thank you, sorry.
Hi, everybody online. Can you hear me? It's Alan talking. 1 minute. Just looking to place where we think we should belong. So can you just recognise whether you can hear me, please?
I mean, in terms of scale for the impacts, because there's actually not that many people involved.
Can you hear me online? Someone drop a message if you can hear me, please.
The trouble is I am working with them and the companies aren't, the market's not signalling for them. The market is signalling for iron ore, aluminium and everything else.
Testing,
I'm
testing.
really inclined to
Not a
say
good operator.
we could potentially get some strategic victories out of picking the right ones.
Okay, so just in terms of placement, that would be lower value.
The scale impact, I mean, in terms of WA,
Okay, guys, so you can hear me. Thank you very much for the confirmation. Where would you like to place the placard? So right now we have it in the top right-hand corner.
Transitioning to the next one.
I'm fed up with this beeping. Is everyone else?
My right standing here, they can see me, so I can look at that.
Alex,
See, I'm making the cameraman more than you I'm moving around.
Getting ourselves.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name's Alex. I joined the NZN not just to learn, meet great people and eat pizza once a month, but mainly to try and work out how I could have the maximum impact in reducing the harm we're doing to our planet. My pitch today, I've chosen consumer-led balancing of the electricity grid to reduce emissions.
I know you have to.
There we go. So why is this subject important? Why is this subject important? I can tell. Why is this subject important for reducing emissions? So evening peak consumption is a key driver to the coal and gas capacity we need, and the amount of fossil fuel baseload power that's required on most grids. And as you can see in this graph from WA last week, power peaks for about 3 hours in the evening when everyone gets home, starts peaking in terms of the TV. That's just after the sun goes down, so the sun is disappearing. If there's no wind, then the power is over 95% from fossil fuels. So my pitch is about how we might change that. Change is currently mainly top-down, with 3 main mechanisms being renewables, grid-scale storage, and smart grid trials. The main consumer push is the uptake of home batteries, but that's pretty small, and is held back by the lack of incentives coming from the top. So this is all good stuff, and it will get us there eventually, but we don't have forever to get this done, as I'm sure you all know. So can consumers speed up the change instead? Here's an illustration to try and understand whether we can tangibly make a difference. Peak evening power in WA is about 3,000 megawatts. Of that, domestic use is about 25%. So if we look at how much power that is over the 3-hour peak, and then imagine somehow we make a 10% difference. What would that look like? It's about 360 watt hours per household, but it's hard to relate to what that actually means, right? And I couldn't work out how many Olympic swimming pools that is either. But it would mean, just to imagine it, about 23% of all those households not turning their dishwasher on after dinner, for example, okay? That would equate to that. The 10% reduction in heating power would actually save about 74,000 tonnes of carbon emissions over a year. Now, somehow the NZN managed to spark that change, then you could say that each member would be responsible for about 300 tonnes of savings. Given we're each responsible on average for about 34 tonnes of carbon per capita, that's a 10 times leverage factor on the impact you can have on our influence, right? And that's what I'm trying to get to. What's the biggest leverage we can have here? That's not bad. If you scale that nationally, it could be 150 times. If you scale that globally, it could be 35,000 times. Imagine if we could walk out of here thinking we made a 35,000 times impact. It would be pretty awesome, okay? Now we're probably not going to have much luck just by going out and telling 150,000 households not to run their dishwasher in the evening. But there's other ways. There's a bunch of other ways for consumers to reduce the peak, and here's some potential examples. So at home, avoid running appliances in that peak from 5 to 8. And there's some examples like not putting the dishwasher on straight after dinner, or running the aircon harder before 5 PM when there's nice green energy, and then turning it off during the peak. And there's information and technology out there to enable consumers to run appliances when the grid is cleanest. One example in the US is What Time. That started as an SMS service that sent people messages when the grid was clean. Now it's a technology that's sold to appliance manufacturers and integrates with systems like Siri and Alexa. On commercial premises, all of the above apply, but also many businesses close at 5:30. We can encourage people to power down when they go home. Now they're just examples. There's work to be done to refine them and broadcast them to the world in a coherent and compelling message. But if enough people take action, the potential is huge. So, could the NZN be the spark that creates a movement? What has happened before with a global movement which started right here in Perth. Plastic-Free July was started by a handful of people just over 10 years ago. And a recent survey concluded that nearly 1/3 of global consumers were aware of it, and 13% had participated, which is incredible, right? So this is about challenging the notion that we have to wait for the powers that be to slowly clean up the grid. As the quote says, the power in people is stronger than people in power. And as Steve said a few meetings ago, think big, think radical, think of others, and let's shift the dial. Thank you.
Microphone for questions, please.
So quite a funny little thing when you mentioned about changing consumer behaviour. It's kind of a Q&A, but like, first of all, have you seen the new synergy tariff?
No.
For residential?
No.
So there's a new synergy residential tariff, which is 8 cents during the day because there's an excess. The government has to buy super cheap solar. And this has only just come out in the last 2 months. So, and then it's 50 cents in that evening for those 3 hours per kilowatt hour. So even though they don't track carbon emissions, it's using all coal pretty much anyway, and gas, it is impacting the overall mix.
That has the same effect of, lowering that peak in the evening, that's right.
Any other, even though we're not allowed to in WA, any other consumer-led balancing that you can see other than behaviour change?
Well, the whole point of this is it doesn't have to wait for things like people like synergy. It's what can people do. There's one idea I have which I haven't put in here, but how do you get messaging out to people, right? If you could turn this into a coherent, simple message, it's easy enough for people to digest, both information and technology, and apps and things that can control your smart devices. If you could partner with, for example, this is thinking big, Facebook. If Facebook could somehow benefit from free advertising, they then somehow get credit for people that take action on the message they're sending out, or Google, or whoever does advertising, then you could potentially just go massive. Because I mean, we have to scale and think big here. So I'm thinking of something we can start here, and then can just scale and scale and scale, and be a simple thing that people will do. And if enough people do it, the difference will be huge.
Alex, got a question from online. The question is, does grid scale storage at a local community level with energy harvested from many rooftop systems fall into this pitch?
It's not really a consumer-led thing. This is about what can we do that is just about our messaging and information without having to create infrastructure, without having to do any major things that will take a long time. How can we and the global community eventually we get to them, make a difference basically, without all that red tape and that process and
Conscious.
yeah, it's a consumer movement. A bit like plastic-free jar, that's a really good example. That's just people being more aware of it and consumers changing their behaviour.
You're just building that online. So would you imagine this materialising as a website that is consumer source of knowledge, or perhaps the top 10 things you could do to reduce your emissions?
That's what we've worked on for 6 months to work out the best way to get a message out. I don't know the answer. And there's people that are far better at that than me, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, Synergy already had that, right? So Synergy already have top tips on how to reduce your energy. There is a reason behind the tariff coming in for those sort of 4 hours of the evening. But the problem is not very many people know, and they're not going to know until they get their first bill and figure it out. They don't have the appropriate metering to actually understand why their blocks of time.
Metering is also key, and I think part of this would be that there needs to be an aggregator. So, for example, say all of us in this room do it, and it's 3 tons of carbon. As more and more people do it, there could be an aggregator that shows the movement growing, and eventually that number gets to billions because there's a million people doing it.
Okay, if you really want to think big, we could be the prelude to the NZN VPP, virtual power plant, which is basically harvesting demand response from all of the people who sign up, right, via NZN in order to specifically reduce consumption during that very, very massive peak period. Yes, Max. Sorry, I know we've run out of time.
Mind if I just make a comment on that? Oh, thank you very much. So there is also there's a potential technology solution sitting in the sidelines here as well, that Liz was alluding to. To give one self-serving example of something that I've done, I came up with this thing a few months ago to link the amount of solar sensed on my rooftop, not actually through my solar panels, but just a separate sensor, to turning on and off my pool pump. Right? So it's a very simple way, which can be easily internet connected to a smart plug, to locally control the demand in my house based on generation by solar panels. Taking that a step further, once you've got 10,000 NZN pool pumps all connected together, you can then offer things back into to support a greener grid. You can help with the grid firming, and you've done that without synergy, which is the big problem with WA. Everything under synergy.
Okay, 1 minute. Let's place the item on the grid.
Exciting.
Well, should we? I don't want to move it totally to the doghouse, but I think you make a good point. So move it up.
Oh, everything is in the middle.
I think we're going to put in there.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the funny thing is when we say fast, so I've got a mate who built like $1 million house, guzzling energy, got his first electricity bill from Synergy, brand new house that actually has a smart meter, so we can see his consumption breaking down.
3 more pictures.
But he was like, oh, I'm gonna install solar. And then I was like, yeah, what are you doing? You do like 100 kilowatt hours a day in a house. Oh, I showed him that new tariff. He changed it the next day and changed his entire consumption patterns and could see the impact within a day. So the impact is fast when you have access to the data. And instead of installing solar,
Yes, this is good.
doing exactly that consumer-led change.
I think we're top one.
I need 1 minute.
Yep.
That doesn't fall you, but instead of that, you can do the other change.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. He said 1 minute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm afraid. Kerry's one didn't get copied over.
Oh, that's all right.
But it is now.
Hold on, actually.
So you're on the spot.
It is difficult in this position, isn't it?
Kerry, can you just move the sticker over?
Yep.
And maybe
300 mil.
Yeah, good.
It's pretty good.
Move to there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you could actually even come further.
Okay. Just trying to see this TV screen.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yep.
Thank you for that. Okay, so good to start. Thank you. I'm Kerry Hill. I'm relatively new in this group. I'm here to talk about changing the way we eat, and I modified it to working with supermarkets and grocery consumers to work towards net zero. I don't have a lot of statistics in this. So when we're talking about impact and with emissions, it's more of a gut feeling at this point in time. Yes, so microplastics and okay, thank you. Microplastics, you've probably heard a lot about it in terms of like the huge environmental impact we have, but there's also mounting concerns about the health impact as well. So this is coming from the environmental impact as well as like huge concerns, where in March and April, it was reported in The Guardian and also over the last few years in many other literacy that microplastics are being detected in human blood, in placentas, in lungs, in stomachs. It's mind-boggling. So it's another reason why we should be focusing on reducing microplastics. Here's just another example. So the endocrine system threatens human health. More stories here. But basically, the plastics that are used in, especially the packaging that we use every day, is affecting our health systems, our hormones, our babies. And it's also coming up in biodegradable plastics. So it's everywhere. We need to understand it better. It's not very well known yet. These are just photos that I took on the weekend, walking down the alleys at the grocery store. So we pat ourselves on the back and think, oh yeah, we've got rid of plastic bags. There's so much more that we can do. Everything is covered in plastic, this kind of plastic that affects our health, but also the microplastic situation in the great garbage patch, the ocean patch. And the fact is everyone goes to the grocery store. It's all around us. It's, you know, every day. So yes, it's maybe small in terms of comparing ourselves to iron ore and gas production in terms of emissions, but the impact is huge. So yeah, we've got a long way to go just with everyday items. And actually, when I originally made this presentation, these are actually items that aren't included in the Red Cycle initiative at the moment. So a lot of the meat out there, you can't actually recycle at all, the plastic with that. These, you think, all right, great, macro, it's green, it's all good. It's not good. So you can't put that into Red Cycle, and you also are affected by these potential endocrine harmful plastics. So yeah, the goal is to get it out of the landfill, of course, that goes without saying, but also getting it out of our bodies. And part of what I'm trying to pitch today is to increase the knowledge in society, like starting locally, but this is definitely like Plastic Free July, a huge thing that we can talk about that not only is nationwide, but global. There are lots of exciting initiatives out there at the moment for us to move away from single-use plastics. So you've probably seen Zero & Co, that's quite new. So that's, they're calling it net zero in terms of like no waste. So you return all your plastics back by post to the seller, and then they refill it and you send it back. Everyone also loves the Who Gives a Crap. That's an easy one as well. That's plastic free, just comes to you. The example I'd just like to make out here is Kakula Sisters. There are lots of these little, family-run grocery stores out and about in the community. And it's a way, like going to the market, for example, a farmer's market, where you can go, you can bring your own containers. You don't need to buy anything with packaging. However, someone like myself, I've recently had a baby and I've also got another child. There's no parking here. There's no trolleys. You can't get in with your pram. It's a hassle. Like you have to go and pay for parking or take public transport. So it's not convenient. The same thing here, when you're ordering this, we ran out of dishwashing tabs the other day. It took another 2 weeks for them to come through. So I had to borrow some from a neighbour just so I didn't have to buy something with packaging. So there are lots of ways that we can make a difference, but it takes a lot of time. It's not convenient. So here are some success stories that I've mentioned that we've seen already. So Red Cycle is the start, but the problem here as well is we're still using plastics. The food sellers and the product manufacturers are still using plastic. We've got a long way to go, but we need to actually shift our mindset in avoiding plastic completely. Getting sellers and producers to actually use paper instead, to use glass if possible, or some kind of packaging that you can replace, like Heineken beer, for example, in Holland. You drink your beers, you put it in the crate, and then you take the crate into the shop, and then they swap over your beers for the bottles. Yeah, pretty much. It's really awesome. So we need to try and think of those kinds of things. Also, the state government has done some awesome work, and we're almost finished here. As we know, no more single-use plastic coffee cups that are coming. That's pretty much been legislated. With takeaway containers, they're banning that. So, your Chinese plastic containers, they're not meant to be in circulation anymore. They still are, but I think they're getting phased out. So there's some awesome initiatives that are going around, takeaways, as you can see there, with cups, but also plates, for example. And I think somebody brought in these awesome plates tonight. So we're going in the right direction. Last one here. So small businesses are leading the way, but how can we lobby the government, the major supermarkets, and also the smaller supermarkets to do something similar? So when I lived in Karratha, this was an awesome service that we had. So this lady drove around, not her, she was a 1,000 customer. She won a prize, but to where you could buy all your bulk goods. You could get everything there except for your fruit and veg. So we had another guy from another truck that sold the fruit and veg, but these are the ways that people are trying to get around it, but who has time? Let's just stick to the supermarkets, get them to change, and then everyone benefits. Thank you. Questions?
I've got one.
Yes.
42.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I probably don't need it.
No, it's for the people on the
Sorry
Zoom.
for the people online. I like the ideas a lot because it's very accessible. Would you think about adding into the lobbying for there are a lot of councils that still don't do FOGO in WA, right? So I do, but I know my mother in Stirling and my sister in Joondalup, they don't have FOGO.
Yep.
Right. So, and it's a pretty simple thing for councils to do,
yep,
which actually goes a long way because you can recycle so much more in the FOGO system. So a lot more of that waste packaging can actually get captured and recycled. Is that something that you think we could add to this list?
It's definitely a part of it, definitely. But I guess the overall agenda here is to actually get us to not even use the packaging somehow in the first place. And that's why markets and these small companies, the small groups are so awesome, because you can bring along, your containers, your milk bottles, anything you like, it avoids it. But it's actually educating people about these issues. And now it's not just about the great plastic garbage patch, it's actually impacting everyday lives and people's health. So yeah, it's definitely raising awareness.
It's about not having your lettuce.
Yeah.
Not getting lettuce in plastic and not the multiple different packaging that some of the products have.
Yeah.
So is it about lobbying the supermarkets or is it about lobbying brands?
It would be both, because like these supermarkets, and when I took the photos, Woolworths, for example, has their own brand that they're looking after, but then also all these other companies that are supplying into Woolworths, obviously it starts with them before Woolworths. So yeah, we need to use the government to influence them to change.
Can I just ask a question from online, just to give people a chance, or if you need to?
Well, we are running short on time, but if you make it a fast one.
Okay, so just had a very quick comment from Phoebe online, just saying that WA and ACT are the only jurisdictions where they can't recycle commercial volumes of soft plastic before we eliminate petrochemical-based plastic foods, not compostable products altogether. And another comment from Doug Hull online. Doug was basically saying, I think the best solution is to lobby for a plastic tax. Currently, plastic is cheap and convenient. If it became more expensive, the market would rebalance itself.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Very good points. Thank you. Thank you. You too. Yeah, that's me.
Who's got the camera?
We're rolling here.
Have you got the pointing bone?
Kerry, have you got the clicker?
Have you got the pointing bone? Okay, yep.
So
that one?
that's the advanced one, yeah. Go for it.
All right, you pressed record, then we're good to go. Yeah, oh God. All right, now I'm not as polished and full of numbers or slick presentations as the rest of you. This is about not where my heart is, but where my mind is. My heart is I want to do something big. My mind and my head is telling me it's got to be something that we can do as a group, as a community here. What is our collective horsepower? How can we inform, empower, act? Coming to that mantra, and what is something tangible and credible that we can work on here? So it is about electrify your home, and that's our priority. And we focus diligently on this. And this is not a multi-year program. It's something we spend the next 6 months, and it maybe goes into the various dashboards, and we show that collective improvement over time. So why is that important for us? And it comes down to really, simply, it's about something I can explain to my colleagues, I can explain to my family, I can explain to my friends, I can have an outcome, and there's a business advantage for me in the end. It pays for itself. So there's no reason why we can't do it. And we can't hide behind, oh, iron ore, you need to go and change. Oh, agriculture, you need to change. We need to walk the talk and we need to do it. As a consequence, if we electrify our homes, do not have any gas appliances. Are we shot? Do not have any gas appliances in your house, period, stop, now, change out now. We can do this. This has immediate health impacts. It improves the air quality in your house now, immediately improves your efficiency in the house, immediately reduces your carbon footprint. So do it now. And the beauty is, yes, you get a gas bill once every 2 months. It's hard to react to that. If you've got a smart meter, some of us do have the smart meters, you can get real-time data with your power bill all the time. It's actually payment, my phone's over there, it's extremely addictive. Once you've got your battery or your solar panels and you can monitor your power consumption, it's right there in your fingertips. So through electricity, we can get that immediate data. And as a consequence, we can make the right climate impact. And by changing our appliances, by changing your hot water system to a heat pump, that's 3 to 4 times more efficient. If you've got a gas hot water system, even if it's an electrical element, by changing that system, and these are decisions that we will make over years. No, you won't make them all in the next 6 months. But if we start working through each of these individual items and learning about it, one of us in this room is going to have a problem 1 month, and we can focus on that. Let's work and explore the solutions and select the right option there. So it's simple and expandable. The really good thing is then you can add your EVs over time. You don't have to buy an EV now, but you can add it over time. So it's expandable. It's easy to articulate. But the best thing is it's good for your wallet. You're paying clean heat or whatever, $100 a year for simply having a gas account. Forget if you don't even use any gas. You're paying them $100 for simply sending you a bill. And then you pay on top of that anything you do. If you've now replaced that gas appliance with an electrical one, that's going to pay for itself over time because the power is cheaper and you're not paying that double up cost. So it's good for your wallet. And the myths and challenges is that you don't need to put solar on your house and you don't need an EV, or you don't need a battery. Those all help. But by starting to signal and putting those power loads, we already know that they're taking the coal power stations out of Western Australia. So you're actually setting the state up so you can set yourself in a good position, get the technology in place. And as the grid gets greener, as renewables get built out, you get the benefits without doing any further action, but you've already sent that market signal out there. So what I propose we do is we just step through our daily technology choices and devices that we're working on, and we start to understand and reflect on this. This is comparing hot water systems of what we should avoid. Good friends don't let friends build bad houses or whatever is. It's the same principle here. Is we don't let our friends put gas appliances in the house. We don't let them put inefficient appliances in the house. And we help understand, yes, you've got a bit of a capital outlay, but how do we work through this? But as a group, these aren't always simple decisions. It takes some time and effort, but we can work through them as a group. So that's what I see as our sort of rolling cadence of we can step room by room through the house. And then we can communicate that out to all of our neighbours. Then if we can put it into an aggregated app, that would be awesome. So plugging a couple of these together.
Quick one. Can I still have a gas barbecue?
I struggle. My gas barbecue is gone by 2030.
Okay.
So or before. Okay. So you can get electric ones. You can get electric ones, and at the moment I'm struggling is okay. But I suppose when I lived in California, I will never touch a charcoal barbecue because that was air emissions, and we have lived and breathed air emissions. Now with climate change, No, I'm not touching. I love charcoal barbecues, but sorry, can't touch it.
It's also about, what you use every day, what don't you, so using gas barbecue a few times a year compared to heating water every day, obviously heating water every day is a massive difference, whereas the barbecues make it almost.
But I've also set myself a target that it will be gone. Because I've got it plumbed into natural gas. I've changed it to LPG natural gas.
Adrian, a question from live from Doug. He says, I agree, but there is a strong messaging from the government about gas leading the way out of the coal dependency. How do we counter this messaging?
I agree wholeheartedly with that. And so we need to then be signalling either buying green plans, and then maybe there is a bit of a lobby component here where we ensure that Horizon Power and others are building out that green network. Certainly we're working on a project that would double the capacity of the Southwest interconnected system. That will be through renewables. That's a big, massive program. It takes time and effort to work through that. But yes, it would be a marginal improvement to go to a gas power generation without going to the renewables.
Isn't your barbecue a micro pattern of that?
Yes, yeah. So you won't see me using it. Yeah, you won't see me actually using it. It's unplugged at the moment.
So I am guilty of having 2 gas appliances in my house, very small hot water heater, but gas cooking. Okay.
Nope.
And I will not. Okay, so this is where I think
this is 4 times. You're losing 60% efficiency as a consequence.
No, I don't know how to do induction cooking.
It's
Therefore,
easy. It's easy. We switched about 6 months ago. I wouldn't go back.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to suggest here is perhaps there is the food. If you link the food one or the food option with getting rid of your gas cooker by encouraging people to do induction and teaching people how to do induction, right? And demonstrating it's not that bad, then maybe there's something there. Maybe
They do that.
You charge your phone via induction.
We're into prioritisation.
Yep.
You go to Winning Appliances, they'll do that. They sell you the induction of.
Thank you. Well done. Thank you.
Have to do
Yeah.
is when we are ready to do audience, just run up this slider that says odd on it.
Okay. I'll definitely forget.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, I'll definitely forget. Right. We're rolling. Cool. Are we rolling? Being the sound guy and the speaker is cool. So the projects that have been discussed tonight have been on various scales from local to very large. I'm thinking in terms of really, really large, like world changing. I believe that what we can do is drive a system where we're using carbon offsets to create a loan system to remove demand for fossil fuels. Yeah. Make it go. Yay, press the wrong button. That works better. Okay, right now, these are the various different methods that are being used for carbon offset. So companies pay money to these, and almost all of them have nothing to do with fossil fuels, which is the biggest factor that is driving climate change right now, is the burning of fossil fuels. And so what I would like to do, instead of most of these, to my mind, planting trees is great. It's wonderful. I've planted a lot of them myself, but it's the thing to do after we get to a point where there is no demand for fossil fuels. They simply can't give this stuff away. So what we're talking about is a matter of circular loans. So a company, for example, is loaned money to remove the demand for whatever their fossil fuel source is, and then they pay back that loan at the method of 80% of their previous energy spent. And then once we run out of things to spend money on to get rid of fossil fuels, then we can plant trees. Oh, there was another slide in there someplace. I think I skipped it. Oh, that's it. I knew there was a reason why it didn't make sense. Okay, so that I can see, press the button twice. You're taking the piss out of me. Heavy diesel mining equipment was speaking to somebody tonight. It's not really available yet as EVs. So maybe we skipped the time. The big place where it seems we can get a lot of change rapidly is inner city delivery vehicles and suburban buses, because they are also adding to the awful air quality that we have in our cities, burning diesel fuel. And then the last one is retrofitting homes to make them more energy efficient. At this point in Western Australia, 90% of our power comes from fossil fuels. So as we cut down on the demand for energy, we also cut the amount of fossil fuels that are burned. And I put this down because I keep feeling there's some other source of demand for fossil fuels that I'm not aware of. So I'm going to put that something I missed in there, because I'm sure somebody in this room is so smart will say, what about? Both of those not being land-based, there's not really a good replacement for them at this point. So everything I've been thinking in terms of land-based, because what I'm looking at is what is the fastest return, what is the lowest cost per liter to replace, per kilo, however you want to think about it, to replace that demand. So we go for big volumes fast. Agriculture. Yeah, okay. And so the even better if, so there's a company in America called Block Power, and what they've done is they've set up a company which is training young unemployed urban youth to do these retrofits. And they're going into apartment buildings, turning them into all electric buildings. This picture has nothing to do with it. I just really like the picture. I don't know, but anyway, there's a number of people here in this city who are consistently unemployed, migrants, young people, Aboriginal youth, disaffected. Let's get them fixing the problem. So that, I call that the even better if, because we can be training people and basically create an army of retrofitters. Yeah, was that it? We're into Q&A, yay. Okay, questions. These are my questions for you because you're all so smart. Anybody interested in wanting to play? Because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We can change the world, and we can change the world really fast.
I've got a comment.
Can you give him did you run up the audience microphone one? That's the problem with being the sound guy.
That's absolutely fascinating concept.
who is the finance agency underpinning the loan agreement? How does that mechanism work? So who's supplying the money?
Well, the carbon offsets right now are coming from agencies that are collecting that money. So then it would be a matter of either working with those agencies or setting up a fiduciary body. Does everybody like that word? Use that in a sentence to bring the money in, pay the contractors to do the work, and then collect the loans back. So.
Because I think there's a mechanism in here. It's quite similar. It's called contracts for difference. And what that is a mechanism to encourage first movers. So through the taxation portion is apportioning that to the earlier movers, so they're less disadvantaged by the cost burden they're taking. And then that will even out over time. So, you know, a sort of similar model, but the same principle. So it's good.
Could I just have my interpretation of that? I'll fly back to you and see if you agree. So at the moment, a company goes and buys some Australian carbon credits. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you showed in the graph that they're typically funding, like planting trees and so on. What you're saying here is, okay, say you've got a company which is running a fleet of delivery trucks and they're making decisions about purchasing the next delivery truck, but it still costs them, 20% more to buy an EV one. They wouldn't rationally just purely in economics make that decision. But instead you want to channel some of the money that people are keen to put into offsets, into supporting, for example, that company so that they can purchase the EV rather than the other vehicle.
It's creating the business case because then you're paying back the loan at a lower amount than it would have cost you if you bought the diesel vehicles.
Because you've got people putting in money, because it counts as an offset for them, that they're
Yes.
making this thing happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know a bit about offsets, quite a bit actually,
Oh, good.
because I trade in them every day.
Excellent.
So look, I'm more than happy to have a discussion with you about some of this. I think that there are a few gaps in the chain that actually require the clean energy regulator to establish some alternate methodologies than the ones that are on that list that would potentially work. There's also a couple of things that make it very difficult. So I agree with the analogy that you brought up in relation to say electrifying trucks. Okay, great idea. The problem is that as soon as you create an ACCU or an Australian carbon credit, you actually have to add back what you would have otherwise have emitted, and so you therefore get a zero value when you put in fleet EV requirements, or if you change under the current fleet rules for the clean energy regulator. What I would suggest is what you're talking about is epic. I personally I'm desperately trying to get microfinancing for farmers up and running to get them to replace irrigation equipment with renewable, or diesel-fired irrigation pumps. They can earn LGCs, but they can't even get reduced rate financing for that. And that's a hardwired current arrangement. So I think that perhaps if we chop down what you're talking about a bit, that might, and take off some smaller chunks, that might be a little bit.
I'm a big fan of starting small and building up, and I'd love to talk to you more about it.
Yeah, sure.
I know we're running out of time, but Keith, just one comment from mine. So this is a comment is from Phoebe saying, brilliant. I'm a champion of community wealth building, which is decades overdue take off in Australia to create those local jobs through anchor institutions. Decades behind the UK, several behind the US. We have pivoted back to WA after attempting to launch community wealth building in Western Sydney, Blacktown. So an example of what you're talking about with societal and institutional funding.
Yes.
Thank you, Phoebe.
Cool.
We're into grid prioritization, and then we're going to vote for the winner.
Done.
Thank you. I was hoping somebody with your knowledge would be here. I'm here. So good.
I'm more than happy to have a chat with you about it. I'll give you my card and we can maybe do a team.
I think we need a new matrix in terms of something that we really want to explore and understand more.